When you think of an empire, you usually imagine European maps, colonial flags, and bankers in London or Paris. But history whispers an unsettling truth to us. Long before Europe became powerful with gold, there was a completely different force controlling the flow of gold in the world market. Not Venice, not Amsterdam, not London. South of the Sahara Desert, an African kingdom whose name most of us don't even know today was powerful enough to influence trade routes, prices, and even the monetary system of the Mediterranean. Surprised, right? In this video, we will tell the story of the forgotten African kingdom that controlled the gold market before Europe did. But first, let's ask this question. If this kingdom truly determined the fate of gold, why is it almost absent in history books? Who was trying to hide what, or where did we refuse to look? The stage is West Africa between the 7th and 13th centuries, EED. In the north, the wealthy Islamic cities along the Mediterranean coast. In the south, gold mines hidden among forests and river valleys. And between them, a massive barrier stretching 1,000 kilometers, making life and trade difficult, the Sahara Desert. On paper, this region seems almost impossible to connect with the global economy. But right here, the Ghana kingdom founded by the Soninka people appears on stage. The Ghana Empire was not built directly on the gold deposits, but slightly to the north. This was no coincidence. The kingdom acted as a station, a filter, and a customs wall between the forest region, where gold was extracted, and the desert regions where salt was produced. The gold mines were in the south, but all roads to the Mediterranean had to pass through points controlled by Ghana. In other words, the king of Ghana was not a gold producer. He had a much more profitable role, the owner of the network, the gatekeeper. Merchants brought salt, cloth, copper, and luxury goods from North Africa on camels. In return, they went back with the gold of West Africa. Ghana controlled this flow through two critical methods. The first was taxation. The kingdom collected taxes from every salt caravan entering and every gold load leaving the region. The second, even more ingenious method, was this. The king kept the large gold nuggets only for himself, allowing the public and foreign merchants to trade only with gold dust. This way, he controlled the supply and perception in the market, manipulating prices. Some sources mention an interesting method used in the Ghana region known as silent trade. When trading with groups whose language they did not know or whose location they wanted to keep secret, the gold owners would leave gold dust at the edge of a river or forest, while the other side placed blocks of salt and goods at a certain distance. The parties never saw each other. They only adjusted the amount of gold and goods based on whether the offer seemed fair. This method acted like an early trust protocol, keeping the source of the gold secret while allowing trade to continue. The result was simple but striking. Long before Europe developed a modern financial system, a king south of the Sahara was effectively setting the gold standard. A large portion of the dinars minted in the Mediterranean world were backed by West African gold money changers in Cairo, merchants in Baghdad, and even palace economies in the Middle East became dependent on the gold produced and filtered by Ghana and the Mali kingdom that followed it. In other words, a significant share of the global gold supply passed through the hands of a kingdom we call forgotten today. So how did this power emerge? The origin of the story begins with camels entering trans-Saharan trade. When camel caravans made hundreds of kilometers of desert travel possible, a more regular connection could be established between the Islamic cities in the north and the gold regions in the south. Ghana positioned itself right on this new network. The capital, Saleh, gradually became not only a political center but also a financial and logistical hub. One part of the city was the king's palace and the locals' quarter. The other part belonged to the Muslim merchants, with its mosques, markets, and caravanserais. The bridge between these two worlds was not just trade, it was also relationships of money, credit, and trust. Gold dust became the de facto currency of the region. Tax, tribute, and gift systems formed a revenue structure similar to a modern state budget. The king of Ghana collected tribute from vassal kingdoms, protected trade routes, and used the accumulated gold to buy political loyalty and finance his military. In other words, gold was not just a mineral, but the direct source of political stability, border security, and regional power. As power increased, so did the risks. A system dependent on the flow of gold relied on several critical factors: the security of the desert routes, demand from northern markets, and the production of the mines in the south. If any of these links broke, the entire system would shake. Indeed, in the 11th and 12th centuries, as political balances in the north shifted, new trade actors emerged and climate conditions became harsher. Ghana's strength began to weaken. Tuareg and Berber raids, the rise of rival trade routes, and internal revolts slowly broke this golden gate. The collapse of Ghana did not mean the end of the importance of gold. On the contrary, the Mali Empire soon took the stage, carrying gold wealth to the Mediterranean even more spectacularly, with figures like Mansa Musa. The gold Musa, distributed in Cairo during his pilgrimage in the 14th century, temporarily depressed prices in the Egyptian market and strengthened the image on European maps of a land where gold never runs out and in West Africa, but this was mostly the show part. The critical reality did not change. Centuries before Europe, West African kingdoms held a de facto monopoly on the gold supply. From today's perspective, what is striking is this. In school books, we often start the story of gold with the Age of Exploration, American gold, and Spanish ships, as if the global history of gold began abruptly in the 16th century. Yet long before that, West African gold powered the monetary systems of the Mediterranean and the Middle East for centuries. The stability of the dinars in the Islamic world, the security of trade routes, and the wealth of city-states converged on a hidden common denominator, gold, from south of the Sahara. Here we must pause and ask a disturbing question. Why is this story almost non-existent in the narrative of global finance? When we think of gold, why do we immediately think of the London bullion market, Wall Street, or Swiss refineries, and not Ghana or Mali? The answer is not only the negligence of history books, it is also hidden in the relationship between power, narrative, and memory. The colonial period repackaged not only Africa's minerals, but also its history. After Europe took control, it also shifted the starting point of the story closer to itself. When we draw parallels with today's world, the pattern looks strikingly familiar. On one side, regions that supply raw materials. On the other side, centers that process, price, and financialize those materials. Yesterday, West African gold was priced through Cairo and Baghdad. Today, gold and other critical minerals extracted from Africa, South America, and Asia gain value in centers like London, New York, and Zurich. This disconnect between production and pricing is one of the foundational architects of global inequality. The example of Ghana reminds us of this. Even if a region supplies a critical resource to the world market for a long time, if it does not control the narrative, it can disappear from the stage of history. Controlling gold does not always mean controlling the story. Even today, African countries are trying to increase local added value for gold and other minerals, building refinery and processing capacity. Just like Ghana did centuries ago, they are trying to own not just the ore at the end of the tunnel, but the tunnel itself. There are at least three clear lessons we can draw from this story. First, invisible empires have always existed in global finance. Powers that do not have colors on maps, but control the flow of money. The Ghana Empire is an early example on this invisible page of modern financial history. Second, having a valuable resource and determining its price are not the same thing. Just like today's commodity exporting countries, the gold kingdoms of the past were pushed aside over time as the financial center shifted to other places. Third, the memory of economic power is weak. When the winners rewrite the story, the role of previous owners quickly falls into the forgotten category. If we carry these lessons to today, a more concrete question emerges for investors and savers. Are you looking not only at what you invest in, but also whose story you are investing in? When talking about gold, oil, lithium, or another resource, do you consider the silent regions behind these resources, the invisible workers, and the overlooked histories? Or are you, like the old merchants, looking only at the final price board? Finally, let's leave an open-ended question as a warning. Which regions today are the silent suppliers that feed the global economy, but do not receive the place they deserve in the narrative, just like the West African kingdoms of the Middle Ages? When you look from today at the financial history that will be written decades from now, which countries do you think will remain in the footnotes and which will become the new Ghana? If this story has changed your perspective a little about where money and power come from, take a look at the other stories we tell on this channel. Because the history of money is not only the story of banks or stock markets, but also of forgotten kingdoms, caravans crossing deserts, and cities erased from maps. And without understanding that story, we can never fully know what we are truly investing in today's financial world. If what I've shared today helped you see the world from a different perspective, don't forget to subscribe. Because history always has an answer, you just need to look from the right angle, and I'm here to help you find those answers buried in the dusty pages of financial history.